And welcome to the special edition of Hannity. Now, tonight for the hour, we're going to show you the very best of our opening monologues. Now, let's start with President Trump taking on the fake news media. Now, that's done just about everything they can to damage, delegitimize, and destroy the commander-in-chief. The liberal press has viciously attacked this president while completely ignoring his long list of accomplishments. And that was the focus of a recent opening monologue. Take a look. All right, so the conspiracy theorists over at CNN, MSNBC, mainstream media, they're at it again. Now, after failed attempts to smear President Trump with cries of Russia, 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 after claiming the president is about to start a nuclear war with North Korea, and after falsely painting the president, conservatives, Republicans as racist bigots, well, now the leftist hacks have created a fake news new talking point that they want to spread around in their new echo chamber. Now, members of the media elite, they know it all. And media are now pretending to be experts in psychiatry and psychology. And they have found a brand new way to try and delegitimize and destroy President Donald Trump. They are now claiming he is unhinged. He's unfit to serve. Now, here's the counsel to the president, Kellyanne Conway, firing back against this media bias earlier today on Fox and Friends.
It's such an absurd analysis playing armchair psychiatrist, and it's not just him, it's a lot of people on TV. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when news stations reported the news.
Now, Kellyanne is spot on, and now to highlight this out-of-control bias by the leftist press, well, we're going to use this sound we used last night again tonight. Remember this? You'll hear it. Okay, so you, the American people, you can see for yourselves just how rampant this leftist Trump-hating ideology is in the leftist media. Let's just take a look at the press claiming that the president is unfit to serve. They all echo each other. Take a look.
Your behavior is causing great concern among the majority of the American people.
Is he suffering from some kind of illness? Is he fit for office?
The only possible, and this is on Twitter, the only possible defensible explanation for Trump's disgusting, unpresidential, narcissistic behavior would be early onset dementia. Maybe. She's not the only one who's been saying. Some people have been saying that for months. Has he shown that he's fit for office?
No.
Especially in this moment?
Absolutely not.
It was an astounding chain of lies tied together by lunatic asides by a man who obviously is mentally unstable.
That is not sane behavior. The only defensible excuse, the only defensible explanation is if he is not mentally well.
A man who seemingly suffers from a clinical form of idiocy.
Let me put this question to you. Do you think the president's stable?
No.
John?
No. All right, so just when you thought they couldn't get any lower, this is the new standard on CNN, NBC, which apparently they have no standards anymore. But of course, the slanderous smears, they don't stop there. Now, they've also claimed President Trump is also unhinged. And again, they all echo each other. It's like they live in the same, well, fishbowl. Take a look.
President Trump's speech last night, which was widely greeted in the media as unhinged and full of lies.
An alarming warning from the former boss of U.S. intelligence after a wild and angry and sometimes unhinged campaign rally.
He's unhinged. It's embarrassing.
That was a president totally unhinged. There's little doubt about that for anyone watching.
I think that the president is unfit. I think the president is unhinged. But many of us have known that for 18 months.
What we're dealing with right now is a problematic president, an irrational president.
He is obviously desperate. I think he must know at some level, somewhere, that he is failing miserably.
All right, now it's time for me to diagnose them. I'll put up the same degrees that they have. Right there, there's my degree. They're suffering from being a bunch of overpaid, pampered, way out of touch people that have no clue what life is like for real Americans, and they're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. See, I got my degree. Now, whatever happened to the media reporting truth and facts and being fair, balanced, objective? What we're seeing now is beyond media malpractice. They are doing a tremendous disservice to you, the American people, and the country by continually spreading lies and falsehoods about the president and advancing their agenda. Now, there's so blinded by this hatred of the president, it makes them completely, seemingly incapable now to hardly ever tell the truth. And don't forget, these so-called journalists, they're supposed to be informing you about the news of the day. They were the same people exposed by WikiLeaks for doing what? Colluding with Hillary Clinton's campaign. Now take a look at the examples right there on the side of your screen. The media has been exposed again and again and again as being massive purveyors of phony fake news. And that's why the president rightly continues to call them out almost on a daily basis. Now, it has created in this country a massive informational crisis, and right now, the left has zero credibility with most people. Just look at their approval ratings. The press is so fixated on going after this president and taking him down and his family down and the people close to him down. Well, they don't care any longer about getting it right, and they don't care about telling the truth. That's sad. One example we have recent is the New York Times. Earlier this month, they were reporting that Vice President was running a shadow campaign and planning on running against the president in 2020. The Vice President said it's absolutely false. That is one of literally hundreds of examples of fake news. And instead of reporting the facts, the liberal press, they're more focused on advancing their leftist ideological extreme political agenda. They create conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory. They smear the president every single chance they get now. And the media, well, they never reported the truth about the mess that President Obama left behind, and they're not reporting on what this president has accomplished, what his agenda is, what his solutions are, and how he's trying to fix things. They seemingly don't care about the people that should matter the most. Forgotten men, forgotten women in this country who made the big difference in this election that are suffering daily. Now, I honestly think we're the only show that talks regularly. 50 million Americans on food stamps, 13 million more under Obama. 50 million Americans in poverty, 8 million more after Obama. 95 million Americans out of the labor force. Now it's down to 94 million. But under Obama, the lowest labor participation rate since the 70s. Under Obama, the worst economic recovery since the 40s. The lowest home ownership rate under Obama in 51 years, and Obama doubled the national debt. And I can go on all night. Now, these are facts. The media never told you the entire election season about these things. And now that President Trump is in office, well, now the media is changing their tactics. They just refuse to report on this president's accomplishments because, what, it'll make them look good? You know, since members of the lazy press, they aren't interested in doing their job, well, I guess I'll do it for them. Here's everything. We'll go through the whole list tonight that the media will not tell you about the president's accomplishments. And by the way, this is not even a full list. And to emphasize all of these, we'll go back and we'll bring our ding sound back to get the tone-deaf media's attention. Let's go through them. He nominated, the Senate confirmed, the originalist he promised, Neil Gorsuch, for the Supreme Court. The stock market is now at an all-time high. Consumer confidence is at a 16-year high. Under President Trump, more than 1 million jobs have been created for people who need them. Mortgage applications for those new homes now has gone up to a 7-year high. Unemployment rate right now, under President Trump, a 16-year low. The president signed the Promoting Women in Entrepreneurship Act. Success. He's gutted Obama-era regulations. The president has also ended the war on coal. He weakened these ridiculous Dodd-Frank regulations. The Trump administration is promoting buying and hiring American. We need the jobs. We're seeing investments for major businesses, Foxconn, Toyota, Ford, all these others promising to spend millions on plants and factories and manufacturing centers here in America. The president's policies have greatly reduced illegal immigration by over 70%. Bids for the border wall, that's underway. President's trying to secure congressional funding. That's a win. The administration's fighting back against sanctuary cities. The president created the Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement Office. He's changed the rules of engagement against ISIS. He drafted a plan to defeat ISIS. The president worked to reduce the cost of the F-35 fighter jet, saving you money. The White House imposed a 5-year lobbying ban. The president sanctioned Iran over its missile program and has committed commander-in-chief, he responded to Syria's use of chemical weapons. The White House also introduced the tax reform plan. The administration is renegotiating NAFTA. The president withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, another campaign promise. He removed the United States out of the Paris Accords, another key promise. The president created a task force to reduce crime. The Justice Department is targeting brutal gangs like MS-13. The president signed an executive order to promote energy independence, which we need, and economic growth. He signed executive orders to protect police officers. He signed an executive order to target drug cartels. The president also signed an executive order for religious freedom. The Trump administration is working to send education back to the states, which is smart. The president's fixing, finally, the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Supreme Court upheld part of the president's temporary travel ban executive order. The president authorized the construction of the Keystone Pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline. He created a commission on election fraud. He's created a commission on opioid addiction. The White House is combating human trafficking. The president rolled back President Obama's ridiculous Cuba policy. Food stamp use is now in this country at a 7-year low after soaring under Barack Obama, with 13 million more Americans on food stamps. The president reduced the White House payroll. That saves you, the taxpayer, millions of dollars. The president's donating his salary. And finally, the president has signed 52 pieces of legislation. Have you heard any of this from the Destroy Trump media? Any of it? Have you ever heard them talk about solutions to the numerous problems we have, real national security concerns? Because what we told you is the truth about the president's accomplishments. They never talk about it. He's getting a lot of things done, frankly, despite very little help from both parties in Congress, and despite a media that utterly wants to destroy him every day. They wake up, how can we destroy him today? This hatred against the president is beyond out of control. It needs to stop. It probably won't. But I have a message for the Democrats. I have a message even for weak Republicans and all of these people in the mainstream media. I'm sure you all love your country, right? Do you want to make America great again? You in the media? Because if you want to make America great and you want to help the people you claim to have a monopoly of compassion on, solve the country's problems. You got that, Democrats, media? Offer solutions occasionally on your shows. And the Democratic Party, no is not the answer to anything. And maybe the media will stop bludgeoning the president politically with your daily lies. And maybe you can start thinking about working for the American people. I'm frankly disgusted with both parties. I'm disgusted with the sewer. I'm disgusted with the swamp that is known as Washington, D.C. Why? Because the American, millions of them, the forgotten men and women in this country, and I started out with pretty much nothing in my adult life, they need help. And guess what? America's enemies are really, really dangerous. Just think for a moment. Just imagine for one moment. If we could just pull together as a country, this is a couple of years, if the country would unite, there's no limits to just how great and prosperous and safe and secure this country will be. And up next on the special edition of Hannity, our opening monologue on the Democratic Party's rampant history of racism. This is something the mainstream media, establishment media, will never tell you about. Stay with us. And welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. So in the aftermath of the tragedy that took place in Charlottesville, Democrats, they tried to paint President Trump, conservatives, and Republicans as racist and bigots. Now, this is part of the left wing's playbook. It's something that they do every 2 and 4 years during election cycles, but they completely ignore the Democratic Party's long history of rampant racism. And that was the topic of a recent opening monologue. Take a look. Tonight, we need to talk about the Democrats and their rampant history of racism. This is something the Democrats, their allies in the liberal media, they're never going to tell you about either. Every 2 years, every 4 years, they pull out their political ads, they tear the country apart in a pathetic, it's their only playbook, attempt to win votes. They divide Americans. Want the proof? We've got the proof. Take a look.
When you don't vote, you let another church explode. When you don't vote, you you allow another cross to burn.
On June 7, 1998, in Texas, my father was killed. He was beaten, chained, and then dragged 3 miles to his death, all because he was black. So when Governor George W. Bush refused to support hate crimes legislation, it was like my father was killed all over again.
This happens, we can predict, every 2 to 4 years. Disgusting, offensive, but it pales in comparison to what the Democrats have tolerated in their own party. Here's something the media won't tell you. Republicans have been the party of Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation. Democrats, what have they been? The party of segregation, the Southern Manifesto. Remember back in 1956, it was Democrats who introduced what was known as that Southern Manifesto. That's a document to resist the Supreme Court decision, Brown versus the Board of Education, and the ruling on segregation in schools. Let's see. People like Bill Clinton's mentor, who he praised many times, J. William Fulbright, well, who's been praised throughout his entire career, signed it. It was overwhelmingly signed by Democratic members of Congress. In 1956, according to Politico, only 2 Republicans supported that. Then we go back to the 1960s, passage of the Civil Rights Act in 64, the Voting Rights Act in 65. Same Southern Democrats that tried to stop these historic pieces of legislation from being passed, including filibustering the Civil Rights Act for months. And then there's the actual vote tallies. Let's take a look at the no votes for the Civil Rights Act of 64. 112 Democrats in Congress voted against it, 41 Republicans. And then for the 1965 Voting Rights Act, 78 Democrats in Congress voted against it, 25 Republicans voted no. So I don't understand the Democrats, the media, that's their history. And some people in the Democratic Party today praise those people that were involved in that history. Here's another fact the media is ignoring. George Wallace, one of the most racist, pro-segregationists in history, Democrat for most of his political career. Then there's Democratic Senator. Remember the former Klansman? Wasn't in charge really that long ago, Robert Byrd. He filibustered the Civil Rights Act for over 14 hours before voting against it. And other well-known Democrats, to vote no, well, let's see. That's Bill Clinton's mentor, J. William Fulbright, and even Al Gore's father, Al Gore Sr. And once again, you would think Democrats would denounce and force those type of people out of their party. But instead, Democrats did the complete opposite, especially when it comes to Robert Byrd, former Klansman, Hillary Clinton. We've got the tape praising him as her mentor after he died. Take a look.
Senator Byrd was a man of surpassing eloquence and nobility. From my first day in the Senate, I sought out his guidance, and he was always generous with his time and his wisdom. I admired his tireless advocacy for his West Virginia constituents. As Secretary of State, I continued to rely on his advice and counsel.
Her mentor, was she giving Robert Byrd a pass? He was in the Klan. Now take a look at what Robert Byrd said to Tony Snow. This was back on Fox News Sunday in just 2001, 16 years ago. Take a look.
White I've seen a lot of white in my time. You want to use that word. But we just need to work together to make our country a better country.
Pretty shocking. Former Klansman, would you call someone who says that your mentor like Hillary? Now, this just highlights the Democrats' massive double standard when it comes to race in America and the divide that they are contributing to. They have made race a political wedge issue in this country for decades, and they have used it, sadly, to rip this country apart. Last night, we showed you how President Obama, remember, he'd rushed to judgment, raced to conclusions before any evidence, any facts came out, any testimony came out in 4 particular high-profile race cases, rushed to judgment. President Obama made it a point to associate himself with groups like Black Lives Matter that chant things like, what do we want dead cops? What do we want them now? Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. President Obama even invited Black Lives Matter to his White House and praised a Black Lives Matter leader, DeRay McKesson, while completely excusing his anti-police remarks. Just take a look at a couple of McKesson's tweets. Quote, "This feared for my life language is perhaps the new execution motto of America's largest gang, the police. Should someone who spews that hatred really have been invited to Obama's White House? Where was the media's outrage then? let alone he was praised by the president at the time, President Obama. Then there's the issue of leftists destroying public property and tearing down monuments like what we saw happen in Durham, North Carolina this week. The left, they're up in arms over President Trump, asking where America should draw a line when it comes to removing these monuments. Well, now look, people can agree with what they think these statues represent. You can have honest disagreement. They don't have a right to destroy property. They don't have a right to be violent because they disagree with what they stand for. We have a political process for that. And as the president said, let local municipalities decide. Now, if the left is so upset over Confederate monuments, then maybe they should feel the same way about displays that honor racist Democrats, the ones we just told you about. Take a look at this statue. Robert Byrd, the former state capitol. Do Democrats now think it needs to be taken down? According to a local West Virginia website, there are at least 56 buildings, bridges, highways, centers, and other places that are named after Robert Byrd. Do they need to be renamed? Do they need to be taken down? Now, there are also highways, statues, other things that are dedicated to people like Al Gore Sr., J. William Fulbright, George Wallace. Now, if the left, members of the media, they're going to lose their collective minds over the latest attack against President Trump, I think it's important to remember this, in many ways, is selective moral outrage. And more importantly, at the end of the day, a huge distraction. This last election was about the forgotten men and women in this country. People on poverty, people on food stamps, and people that cannot find a job. As all these fights go on and all the undermining of the president continues, none of those people are being helped. That is a huge, huge shame for the American people. And coming up, liberal Hollywood elites unhinged in their out-of-control hatred of the president. Our opening monologue on that as the special edition of Hannity continues. Stay with us. Welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. So Hollywood liberals, they've taken their hatred of President Trump to dangerous new levels. Now, we highlighted the vitriol and even calls for violence against the president in a recent opening monologue. Watch this. This past weekend, Rosie O'Donnell, she tweeted out a link to a sick anti-Trump online game. Now, it encourages users to push an image of President Trump to his death, giving players the option to push him off a cliff or into a volcano or into an open manhole in New York City or even into the mouth of a dinosaur. And of course, this disgusting game, well, is meant supposedly in jest, but is it really? But by promoting this, Rosie O'Donnell is now joining the growing list of Hollywood elites who dehumanize President Trump, normalize violence against him and other Republicans. Now, this includes Kathy Griffin, who posed, remember this picture? So disturbing. Every time we show, we have to issue a warning in case your kids are in the room. Now, it's an ISIS-style photo shoot featuring Griffin holding a fake, but very realistic-looking, bloodied, severed head of President Trump. There's also Madonna. She's advocating blowing up the White House. She fantasizes about it.
Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I am outraged. Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Think an awful lot about blowing up the White House. Now, you might also remember this Snoop Dogg music video. Remember, that featured a mock execution of a person dressed as President Trump. Take a look at this. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, any liberal? Now, it's not just Snoop Dogg. Marilyn Manson, he also released a music video with images of President Trump's murder. Mickey Rourke, he threatened to beat Trump with a baseball bat. Robert De Niro, he talked about punching Donald Trump in the face. And you can't forget what Johnny Depp also said. Take a look.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president? I want to clarify, I'm not an actor. I lie for a living.
Just not Donald.
However, it's been a while. And maybe it's time.
Now, let's not forget about Shakespeare in the Park, where a President Trump lookalike got stabbed to death during a New York City performance of Julius Caesar. Now, I could keep going. You get the point. Hollywood hates President Trump, and Rosie O'Donnell and all her liberal friends and celebrities, they are normalizing violence against the administration, against our elected president. Now, tonight, while Congressman Steve Scalise is also recovering after being shot by a deranged left-wing gunman hell-bent on killing as many Republicans as possible on his kill list. Now, is it really responsible for Rosie to gleefully tweet out a game urging users to push the president off a cliff? So is Rosie. These Hollywood elites, are they ever going to see through this blind, bizarre, psychotic hatred and realize that their actions and statements do have consequences? And finally, is Hollywood ever going to stop rooting for the president to die, to fail, to get impeached, and maybe start rooting for this country to succeed? I doubt that's ever going to happen. And coming up, North Korea continues to show signs of aggression. Our opening monologue on how Bill Clinton set the stage for a nuclear North Korea. Stay with us on this special edition of Hannity. Welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. So President Trump has been facing an increasingly dangerous North Korea and their nuclear threat. Now it comes after years of appeasement and capitulation from Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Let's take a look at that opening monologue. So tonight, one of my biggest fears has now come true. North Korea has reportedly developed a nuclear warhead that is capable of reaching the continental United States. Now, this threat will now become a defining issue for the Trump administration, but it's so very important. We've got to learn and understand how it is we got here. If we don't learn from the lessons of history, we are doomed to repeat them. Let's go back to 1994, the Clinton administration. They struck a deal with Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, where, according to the New York Times, the U.S. agreed to give North Korea over $4 billion in energy aid over the course of a decade in exchange, supposedly, for North Korea freezing and eventually ending their nuclear weapons program. Now, as part of the agreement, North Korea would allow inspectors into its nuclear sites, but, and this is very important, would also be allowed to keep their nuclear fuel rods, which can be used to make weapons for an unspecified number of years. Now, of course, Bill Clinton put all those fears aside, praised this agreement, and you might remember when he went out there and he said, "This is good for the American people." Watch this.
I'd like to say just a word about the framework with North Korea that Ambassador Gallucci signed this morning. This is a good deal for the United States. North Korea will freeze and then dismantle its nuclear program. South Korea and our other allies will be better protected. The entire world will be safer as we slow the spread of nuclear weapons. South Korea, with support from Japan and other nations, will bear most of the cost of providing North Korea with fuel to make up for the nuclear energy it is losing. And they will pay for an alternative power system for North Korea that will allow them to produce electricity while making it much harder for them to produce nuclear weapons. The United States and international inspectors will carefully monitor North Korea to make sure it keeps its commitments. Only as it does so will North Korea fully join the community of nations.
Good deal, freeze, dismantle. Of course, Bill Clinton was naive. He turned out to be completely wrong. Why? Because in 1998, North Korea, they test-fired a long-range missile. By 2006, North Korea conducted their first nuclear test. And then, under the Obama administration, the North Korean threat increased rapidly and literally have turned this into a crisis point that President Trump now has to deal with. And in the case of the Obama administration, remember, they drastically cut our strategic defense capabilities. Not a smart thing. Basically, the Clinton administration, the Obama administration, they ignored the problem. They kicked the can down the road. And if the deal Clinton cut with North Korea, if all of that sounds so familiar, well, it is, because it's so similar to the deal that President Obama struck with the radical mullahs in Iran. President Obama gave that rogue regime in Tehran $150 billion in loads of cash. Remember the plane loads of cash and other currencies? Remember the mullahs in Iran? They said that in exchange for that money, they promised not to build nuclear weapons. And Tehran agreed to let inspectors into their nuclear facilities, well, after 25 days, but Iran was still allowed and is still allowed to spin their centrifuges and conduct missile tests. Now, given tonight what we're seeing in North Korea, it is so simple and easy to see where this Iranian deal is headed. Now, what you have to understand tonight is this. Evil in our time must be recognized for what it is. You cannot appease, you cannot capitulate to evil radicals and rogue dictatorships. They don't care about honoring agreements because breaking promises, taking money is just par for the course when dealing with these kinds of regimes. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, well, they should have learned from Neville Chamberlain's policy of appeasement towards Adolf Hitler that set the stage for World War II that led to the death of millions of people. So much for peace in our time. Years ago, I wrote a book. It's called Deliver Us from Evil. In this book, after a lot of research, I talked about how Stalinism, the former Soviet Union, fascism, Nazism, Imperial Japan, the Killing Fields Cambodia, even 9/11 2001, resulted in the deaths of, between that period, over 100 million human souls. And in spite of all of that, there is a mindset today that says, oh, evil can't happen in our time. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Yes, it can, and it might very soon. And thanks to the naivete of Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, who are following in the footsteps of Chamberlain, well, President Trump today has to confront a threat, and there are likely no good solutions, no good outcome here. The United States Security Council on Saturday, they did vote unanimously to sanction North Korea. By the way, China, Russia jumped on board. It's a good step. But we're dealing with an unpredictable madman. His name is Kim Jong-un, and he wants and has nuclear weapons. He doesn't seem to understand, doesn't seem to even care about the idea of mutually assured destruction like the former Soviet Union did. And here's what we know. North Korea reportedly, well, they're now working to get the ability to put a nuclear warhead on missiles capable of hitting the United States. That means cities like Boston and Massachusetts, New York City. Millions of people could die. And Kim Jong-un is also reportedly testing out launching missiles from submarines. So here's what all of this means. The president tonight now faces a clear and present danger, not only for the United States, but now the entire world. Best case scenario, okay, let's say we form a coalition. We launch a massive military operation, take out North Korea's nuclear sites. Here's the problem with that. Well, that would likely obliterate North Korea and lead to fallout like we've never seen before. And let's say we're not successful or not as fast as we want to act. And let's say Kim Jong-un is able to respond, retaliate. And South Korea, Japan, maybe even China could see human tragedy at a level that no one could ever have imagined. So let me be clear. Well, I'm mad that, literally stupid decisions in the past were made when it comes to trusting dictators, rogue regimes. The world needs to take a stand tonight. We must confront this evil in our time before it's too late. And coming up on the special edition of Hannity, there are 5 forces that are actively working to damage and destroy President Trump. We'll explain that and more next. Welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. Now, for months right here in this program, we have been explaining to you how there are 5 forces that are actively working to take down President Trump. Now, we broke it all down in a recent opening monologue. Take a look at this. All right, a reminder, as we've been telling you now for months, 5 forces aligning to take down President Trump. But what we're now seeing in this day and age unfold is far worse than ever before. Let's start with the deep state. They are the most dangerous, selectively leaking information meant to damage and hurt the president. Now, the perfect example, it happened again last night. Washington Post, citing an anonymous source, shocking, anonymous, reporting the president was personally involved in the statement about his son, Don Jr.'s meeting with a Russian lawyer. I guess we live in a day and age where a father can't even help his son when false, phony allegations are being made. Now, this, of course, is nothing new. It's part of the deep state playbook. They want to inflict the maximum amount of damage on the Trump administration. And that's only the beginning of this massive problem. We have leaks from the intelligence community. They have reached out of control levels. They want to hurt the president, stop his agenda. 125 leaks in 126 days, 7 times greater than what we saw from the previous 2 administrations. And it's why now the Trump administration finally is taking action. The Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, he's expected to now hold a press conference later this week on this very issue. Finally, I have now been arguing people need to be held accountable. People broke the law, they belong in jail. And it couldn't come at a better time because, as we've been telling you, CircaNews.com's Sarah Carter has reported that the FBI general counsel now is also under investigation for leaking national security information again to the media. The general counsel of the FBI, and we know that James Comey wrote memos on government computers, some of it classified, and removed it from the FBI, had a friend leak it to the New York Times. He wanted a special counsel, and he got it. Now, the Department of Justice needs to find out who are these leakers, prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. And on top of that, the second big force to destroy Trump media. Their so-called reporting on this administration is so completely abusively biased, it has now reached unparalleled levels. They are now completely out of touch and unhinged. Look at this. A recent Harvard study found that over 90% of NBC, CNN, CBS's coverage about the president's negative. And that's why the president continues to call out the fake news media. Earlier today, he tweeted, quote, "Only the fake news media and Trump enemies want me to stop using social media. 110 million people. Only way for me to get out the truth." Well, that's an understatement. And, of course, the establishment destroyed Trump press. They refuse to let up on the attacks against the president. Want some examples? Oh, these are the most recent ones. Take a look.
I think all this going around and purging people, just like Kim Jong-un, what does he do? He knocks off all his relatives when he gets scared. When you get scared of your position, you start killing people around you. We don't do that in this country. We fire them.